Your take.
I'm happy to be called a postmillennialist, although I think it is unfortunate that all the major positions are named after a word that occurs in one chapter, I think one of the most difficult chapters in one of the most difficult books of the Bible, and then all the positions take their orientation from where do you think Christ's coming is going to be with relationship to that millennium. So on Revelation 20, there are a number of things that I haven't sorted out yet, but I've sorted out enough to know that I believe myself to be what is commonly called a post-millennialist. And that is just something on the book of Revelation. Ambrose Bierce, in his book, The Devil's Dictionary, defined Apocalypse as a book in which St. John the Divine concealed all that he knew. The revealing is done by the commentators who know nothing. So with that as a warning to myself, my understanding of the map of redemptive history is that God created man in the Edenic state. We rebelled and fell. God promised a Messiah. Through types and shadows and sacrifices, prepared the way, tilled the soil, preparing the way for the restoration of Eden. When Christ came in the fullness of time, he was born of a woman, born under the law. He was crucified for the sins of all his people, buried, raised from the dead, and ascended into heaven, gave his Holy Spirit. In 70 AD, that age of preparation came to a climactic, convulsive conclusion. And shortly,
tell the people why. Not everybody here knows what happened in 70 AD.
In 70 AD, the temple was destroyed by the Roman army. There was a revolt of the Jews against Rome. It lasted the revolt lasted, interestingly, for 42 months. Nero's persecution of the church lasted for 42 months, which is named in the book of Revelations, the period of time that the beast would be attacking the saints. So I believe that this convulsive conclusion to the age of preparation came in 70 AD. Up to that time, it was possible for Christians to go to the temple and worship as Paul did. Paul would go there and preach. He took a Nazirite vow, and he was still functioning in the structure of the temple because it was, as the author of Hebrews said, it didn't end in 33 AD. It's fading away. It's about to be done. At Pentecost, the New Age was established. The Christian aeon was established, and I believe that postmillennialism, in brief, is this: it's the idea that the gospel is going to grow and flourish and take over the whole earth. Basically, the Great Commission will be successful. All the nations discipled, baptized, taught obedience. The Great Commission will be successful on earth in history. The world will be Christianized. Then Jesus will come. All enemies will be subdued, brought under his feet. In Psalm 110, the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand. That happened in the ascension. Jesus ascended into heaven, and God told him, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool. So Christ's enemies are made a footstool progressively throughout all history, and then he will come and judge the last enemy personally, death. So at the conclusion of the Christian aeon, which the millennium I take as a symbol of this Christian aeon, this age of grace, the age in which the Great Commission is being fulfilled. At the end of this, Christ will come again and destroy the last enemy, death. The dead will be raised, and we are ushered into the eternal state. So I believe the Judaic aeon, new creation, new heavens and earth, the age to come now.
Satan is bound now?
Yes, with regard to deceiving the nations.
And Revelation was written before AD 70?
Yes, thank you. I believe the book of Revelation was
and
written,
all the other the New
and I believe the whole New Testament, I believe, was written prior to 70 AD. So I believe that John is prophesying the destruction of Jerusalem. The great harlot I take is the city of Jerusalem.
So when Paul tells the Thessalonians that they were destined to suffer, and when Peter says to the Christians that he writes to that they were called for this,
right,
to follow in Jesus' footsteps, suffering, That applies to those Christians before 70 AD or to us now too?
It certainly applies to them. That was the context in which that was being written. But the same thing applies to us as well.
Even though we're going to take over the earth?
Well, certainly, especially because we're going to take over. So the point is, when the gospel goes forth, it's going forth into a hostile world. So we're declaring that Christ is Lord, Christ is King. They don't want him to be king. They want to deny that. So you're going to see the same thing played out over and over again.
But you're saying that the gospel is going to take over,
right,
and that we're going to dominate the world, at which point the suffering would end.
Well,
or if, I mean,
yes,
you said a minute ago,
correct.
we're in the millennium, right?
Right.
So suffering is ended for you.
Well, I hate to break it to you.
Not at this very moment.
Well, this.
Although you count it all joy.
I
know you do.
I'm doing okay. Here's the. If you take the millennium as, there's a difference between some of the 19th century postmillennialists and some of the contemporary ones, of whether the 1,000 years is literal. Some say that the Great Commission is fulfilled progressively, finally gets to a certain tipping point, and then there's a literal 1,000-year golden age before the end. Others, more contemporary postmillennialists, generally take it as the entire church age. But there's
So can you explain to me how the suffering dynamic works?
The suffering dynamic is the way the golden age is ushered in is constant in all ages, and it's the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. We don't.
So you never really realize the millennium, where the gospel has taken over and suffering ends.
No, because Christ is, for example, Christ is not suffering now, but he has suffered. So you can enjoy the fruit of
But I'm asking about the suffering that we do as we follow in the footsteps of Christ.
Right. As we suffer, as we sacrifice, as we send missionaries out to preach the gospel, as people give their lives away, not wasting their lives, as they do this sort of thing, God honors it. God blesses it. And when God blesses it, subsequent generations enjoy the fruit of that. And at some point in history, you have to enter into that possession.
But I'm pressing this question because I think the New Testament is clear that Christians are going to follow in the footsteps of Jesus and conquer the way he conquered by being faithful unto death, not loving their lives even unto death, until he comes. And then there'll be this millennium, but that's clear from what I said a minute ago.
Yep.
And I don't see how that fits in the postmillennial
But see, we would all have the same problem, right? In the millennium, you still have followers of Jesus. You still have regenerate people who aren't being persecuted.
But at that point, everyone who's beheaded on behalf of Jesus gets raised, and Christ now reigns the way that you say he reigns now.
Right.
And there's no more persecution of Christians because Satan is bound.
Right.
According to the way that I would read Revelation 20.
So as a quick answer to this, I would say that if you take martyrdom and suffering as a bare minimum that you can't be a disciple unless it's happening to you, that leaves a lot of North American Christians up a creek, right?
Well, they may not be assaulting us physically, but they're coming at us and telling us basically that our heads are in the sand, or they're in various ways telling us to be quiet at the Thanksgiving dinner.
Except for the way the recipients of Peter's first letter did.
Right,
They've
right,
not
verbal,
been,
right, not necessarily
slander,
physical.
ostracism,
That's right.
Marginalized.
That's right. And it seems to me that your position would demand that all that's over if we're in the millennium and Satan is bound.
Well, let me ask it this way. Just sketch out a little more the Golden Age, because that's never been clear to me from Edwards. I mean, people should know that you're on the side of my favorite theologian.
I know.
Okay?
I was going to bring that up.
This is a problem to me.
There's two main arguments for postmillennialism. One, it's a lot of fun. And number two...
Jonathan Edwards believed it.
And Jonathan Edwards believed it, and I'm tempted to rest my case.
Believed it past tense.
Yeah, that's right. He doesn't believe it anymore.
Not anymore.
That's right. That's right.
Not anymore.